we talk of digital transformation, and here is a glowing example, sir, how digital transformation is helping to serve people. In fact, I don't know how many of you use, sir. I use KMC portal very frequently, and I must submit that it's best. It is better than some of the banking transactions also, sir. Yeah, and also I'm sure, sir, you got 2 commitments as part of this. I think there are many people. Sure, sir. Okay. Now we will request Mr. Ranjan Matthews, Director General, Cellular Operator Operations Association of India, to share his perspective on Digital India.
Honorable Minister for Finance and IT and Reconstruction, and there's a long list. Dr. Mitra sir, it was a pleasure knowing you and working with you in Delhi. And when we were there in FICCI, you were as erudite, analytical, strategic in your thinking, and I can see that Delhi's loss has been West Bengal's gain, sir. All of the accomplishments that you've outlined are just mind-boggling in terms of the short period in time that you've been here. One thing I've learned is that when economists become politicians, and you have to make sure that you don't sit too close to them because they begin to start extracting commitments. But I'd like to say, sir, that you have given us a challenge in terms of the mobile industry. We were from COI the ones who committed and put in the seed money for the sector council, the skills council. And so we do represent that, and we do work with Centum and other partners, pan-India trainers, and so we will make sure, sir, that we follow up on our commitment to have a training center here for skills development. Yes, absolutely, sir. So with that, sir, I'd like to proceed. Dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, I'd like to just give a very quick outline in terms of what Digital India is from our perspective. And I'd like to start off by saying that Digital India is no longer an option for India and for West Bengal or for any state for that matter. It's an imperative. And why? There's a book that was put out recently, became quite famous. It's called The Second Machine Revolution. And the thesis of the book is rather simple. It basically said, listen, the first machine revolution was the Industrial Revolution, and the second machine revolution is basically what we call the knowledge revolution or the digital revolution that is here. And the thesis of that book was again that the reason that countries like the United Kingdom and England and others that piggybacked off of that became so large and flourishing and sovereign in terms of their bandwidth and their power was because they were able to harness what emerged out of the Industrial Revolution, which was to be able to put more horsepower at the fingertips of everybody that was there. So be it the ploughboy to the academician in Cambridge and Oxford and other places, they were able to access more horsepower. And the thesis is that in this knowledge revolution that is going to happen, the second machine revolution, we need, if we are to partake of this revolution, to put more computing power into the hands of the ploughboy, the ploughgirl and everybody else. And without that, this revolution that is going to happen and is happening will completely bypass us. So no longer it is an option, it is a sovereign imperative. It is an imperative for the nation, it is an imperative for the state, and we must be part and parcel of that. And if we don't do this, it's shame on us and shame on this generation that refuses in order to make those types of commitments. Having said that, we go to the specifics of what has happened here in India. Over the last 20 years, we have had a true revolution in this country in terms of what has transpired in terms of the mobile networks and the mobile penetration in the country. Dr. Mitra has talked about the fact that we have 960, and while he was talking, that number has gone up to almost 980 million. And so that is a revolution that took place because there were men and women in this country that saw the need, the opportunity, and garnered the type of investments that were necessary to make that happen in India. Over the last 15 years, 750,000 crore rupees have been raised and invested in this country. A good portion of it was here in West Bengal. Why? Because Kolkata was one of the first areas that started in terms of mobile. One of the first calls, in fact, the mobile calls was made here in Kolkata. And so the second revolution that we talk about, which is the digital revolution, which is the knowledge revolution, the second machine revolution, will also hopefully begin to start finding its flower here from Kolkata and West Bengal. I come from Kerala, and as Dr. Mitra said, West Bengal and Kerala has this symmetry that we come from a state which has large natural resources, is very pretty, is coastal, loves fish, loves education, loves poetry, and because of all of that, Dr. Mitra even married a Malayali. So thank you very much for that compliment to the state of Kerala. But again, the point that we talk about is that when we look at Digital India, the Honorable Prime Minister has articulated that. What does that mean? That means that simply he says that the ability for every person in this country down to the village level must have access to broadband services. And so we talk about NOFAN, which is the National Optical Fiber Network, and so on and so forth. We talk about smart cities, and we talk about all of the infrastructure that has to be built. When we talked about that first revolution, which is the cellular revolution, the second revolution, which is the broadband revolution, has to drive and ride on this infrastructure that is there. Why? If you look at the rest of the countries of the world, there are at least 5 networks that are there for broadband to penetrate and for the citizens to experience broadband. If you look at any one of the developed countries, the developing countries, you have a landline infrastructure which is very heavily penetrated. Almost 95% of households have broadband penetration at 50 and 60 megabits, if not more. They have a satellite network which also has broadband. They have a cable network which has two-way, which is broadband. They have a mobile network which is also heavily penetrated, has fiber to the curb in many of those instances. And of course there are the private networks run by the government for security purposes. 5 networks at least in most countries of the world. What do we have in India? We have 1. Landline, 7% penetrated, diminishing every month. Alright. Satellite, non-existent. If you look at the cable network, it's fragmented, it's not happening. It will probably in a couple of years, but it's not there. So what do we have? We have just one network in which all of the demand for broadband services is going to have to ride on. So the second revolution is still going to be dependent very heavily on the mobile networks. In fact, it will be that last mile that we talk about. Now, let's talk about what broadband means today. Broadband today, if you look at the TRAI definition of broadband, it means that you will get 512 kilobits per second. If you say that this is the definition of broadband to anybody in the rest of the world, you will not pass what they call the giggle test. But yet that is the definition. Where do we need to go? Honorable Prime Minister has said that you must be able to put 2 megabits of spectrum or speed to anybody who demands that. Going from 512, and the actual experience is only about 256 by the way, alright. Going from 512 to 2 megabits for every citizen in India is a tremendous task. And so, what do we need? First of all, let me come back to this bugaboo that we always talk about. We need cell towers. Alright. No coverage in this country is going to happen on the mobile network, which I just articulated is the basis on which broadband is going to go forward. Yes, you will have fiber in the backhaul. Fiber is only the backhaul. The customer facing infrastructure is going to be mobility. Alright, it must have cell towers. It is just a fundamental law of physics and mobile technology. Unfortunately, we have increasing challenges in terms of putting up our cell towers. While we face increasing delays in terms of administrative processes, in terms of getting permissions, and increasingly we find that there is a pushback from the citizens because of the fear of something called electromagnetic field. Now the government of India has adopted one of the most stringent safety norms for electromagnetic frequency in this country. Alright, 90% lower than what the rest of the world adopts, and yet we seem to continue to have a challenge, the fear that asks cell towers to be taken out from residential areas, taken out from institutions and hospitals and so on and so forth, whereas in the rest of the world that isn't a problem. So we have to address this problem from the state governments and from the local authorities in terms of saying, if we are to push broadband, if we are to push the digital experience right down to the gram panchayats and to the villages, we have to begin to start addressing the issue of the location of cell towers, the permissions for those cell towers, the erections of those cell towers, the maintenance of those cell towers, and of course addressing this issue from the government. People tell us the only people that they believe on this issue of the health impacts of EMF is the government. And so all right, sir. Dr. Mitra, thank you, sir. So the point is that we have to address this from the government's perspective as well, in order to be able to give assurance to the people of West Bengal and for any other part of the country that electromagnetic frequency safety norms that are adopted by the country are safe. That has been held by 5 very, very prestigious high courts. Gujarat, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Allahabad High Court have all affirmed in response to PILs that electromagnetic field safety norms as adopted in this country are safe. So we need to be able to make sure that that is done, that has to happen in order for this to go forward. Now looking in terms of the opportunities, and I will stop very quickly with this, I'll just highlight what are the opportunities that are going to emerge as a result of this increasing push out of digital space, especially on the mobile networks. One is increasing convergence. That means that more and more industries and entities will be looking at our networks mobility to be able to push their services, and you'll see that as a result there will be great changes in terms of the way business is done. You already are seeing it in e-commerce. You will see it in e-health, you will see it in e-governance. Dr. Mitra talked about some of the things that are happening in e-governance. This is going to fundamentally alter and change what is going to happen, and people are used now to have the convenience of a mobile device in their hands with increasing horsepower in terms of computing, which basically is a smartphone, which is in fact a computer in your hand, which will enable you to do more and more things. That's the first thing. The second thing is that as a result of this increasing usage of the mobile networks, we are going to spin off tremendous amounts of data. So big data analytics will be an increasing area of opportunity for us and for us folks who are being trained, and for companies that are beginning to look at it. The amount of data that is coming out of our networks now is in what is called the exabytes. We have dispensed with terabytes and all of this. An exabyte is 1 followed by 27 zeros. So the volume of data is going to increase. This is a big opportunity for us. The next opportunity that is going to be there is what we call cloud computing. Increasingly, cloud computing is already there. Enterprises, small businesses are going ahead in terms of going ahead with the adoption of this technology. And again, please remember that the access technology in India will be predominantly mobile. The third opportunity, machine-to-machine Internet of Things. All right, this has already happened. The government of India has taken the lead in terms of setting the standards. India must take the lead in terms of ensuring that machine does not bypass this country. And what do we need to do there? Two things. We've got to do manufacturing in sensors. Without manufacturing base and sensors, nothing's going to happen in machine-to-machine. It's going to go elsewhere in the part of the world. And two, we've got to have IP rights in terms of the technology, in terms of the software that drives the information and the analytics and the predictive analysis that is necessary when we go machine-to-machine. Those are the great opportunities that are staring us in the face. And finally, Honorable Minister talked about skilling. We have a great responsibility in terms of skilling it. That's why we've taken responsibility from the industry to go forward in terms of skilling. We are a sector skill council and we provide this. But again, I think the minister has highlighted the point that we've got to go to the next level in terms of just not skilling at the low end. You know, people look at us in terms of our IT industry and they say, oh well, you guys are IT coolies. You know, maybe it's not something that we would like to address, but the point is that we are at the bottom of the feeding frenzy. All right, we need to upscale. We need to be able to, when is the next Google? When is the next Alibaba? You know, when is the next Uber? You know, going to start coming from the folks who are supposed to be the IT gurus in India. And we've got to start looking at this. We've got to skill our people. You know, I think there was a person who basically articulated this in this country. We used to teach our people how to answer questions. You know, and now you don't need to answer questions. You just need to Google and you'll get to answer questions. So educational system should go beyond that. Some of us know and are trained how to answer questions. And some of us who have gone through educational institutions have been called for in our analytics to be able to question the answer. And that's good. We've gone to the next step. But very few of us have been asked to question the questions themselves, which is what Dr. Mitra pushed us in terms of the skilling and the education. So we need to look at that. And the key for that is to be able to ensure that this country has the right IP protections and infrastructure and the incentives to ensure that that happens. So thank you very much. We as an industry thank the Bengal Chamber of Commerce for this opportunity that you've given us. We stand committed in West Bengal to continue to roll out our infrastructure, both the voice side as well as the digital side. We will be part of the inauguration of the next revolution, which is the digital revolution, the broadband revolution, and we will follow up on our commitment to the Honorable Minister Dr. Mitra to ensure that there is a training center. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mathur. May I now invite Mr. Sudipto Sen. Mr. Sudipto Sen is the Regional Director, Southeast Asia, Vice Chairman, Board Member, India SAS Institute Private Limited. Mr. Sen really doesn't need any letter of introduction for analytics. Thank you, Mr. Sen. Please kindly come.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow panelists. Thank you, BCCI, for inviting me to this event, and I'm indeed delighted to be here. I never miss out a chance of coming to Kolkata because it brings me back to my roots. It gives me awesome amount of pleasure to see the exciting things which are going on right now here in Bengal. Having said that, let me kind of get going with today's topic. Essentially, what I'm going to be talking about is relevance of Internet of Things in today's world. Can somebody help me? It's not moving. Okay. We folks from IT industry, we talk a lot about acronyms, and the acronym called IoT is essentially nothing else but what we call Internet of Things. Why it is so relevant today, if you look at some of the industry pundits and various consultants, they are talking about that today we have 7 to 10 billion objects which are connected to each other. But that number is going to go to anywhere between 26 billion to maybe 30 billion by the year 2020. When we are talking about that, if we look at today, probably all of us could be holding on to a smartphone which is connected with the internet. But here I'm talking about not just the smartphones. Many things which are sitting out there on that chalk drawing which is on the right hand side of my presentation, including the little dog out there, could be part of someone who is participating this scenario of Internet of Things, because even a dog could be connected through the collar which is intelligent to keep on letting you know whether or not he has gone past the electronic fence or where the dog is hanging out there. That's not the only thing. If you look at, I'm sorry, this is not moving forward. My thought process got interrupted because of the technology. Some time ago, there was one of the biggest show which happened in Vegas. This was for the consumer electronics. And the CEO of Samsung was one of the speakers out there. And guess what he said? He said that as on today, about 70% of the devices that Samsung is making is internet enabled, but in next couple of years time, he made a mention that it is going to be 100%. What's the relevance of that? Well, the message behind that was, visualize that you are away from your home and the washing machine and the dryer back home has the intelligence of figuring it out where you are, has the intelligence of figuring it out what is the temperature, humidity outside, so that it picks and chooses the right washing cycle in order to kind of get it done while using least amount of energy. Now, issue is not just confined to that. Issue is whether the energy that you are saving is going to be impacting in the overall realm of things towards the electricity generation, which is at times done by various government organizations as well as individual operators. A smart meter, therefore, connected to the household could be connected back into the grid and would be informing the grid that what is going to be the usage pattern, so that from the grid in turn, a DISCOM could offer you a discounted rate of usage of electricity late in the night, because that's the time usage is the least. And electricity, being a perishable commodity, could have an impact, so to say, in the overall scheme of things. Now let's look at some of the interesting things which are going on in terms of the amount of data which gets generated by a device like maybe when we are talking of a oil and gas industry, a oil platform. Would you be surprised that an oil platform creates about 8 terabytes of data per day? Now, what is the usage of that? Usage of that could be the streaming data which is really coming out. Here the operative word is streaming, which could be used instantaneously in order to figure out where could be a failure point, so that before such a catastrophe happens, appropriate action could be taken on. An aircraft like Boeing 787, would you be surprised that it creates 80 terabytes of data per hour? Each and every component of the aircraft is connected on a network where it is actually saying that, hey, here is my beat for being alive, and here are the various parameters which are getting tracked in order to kind of ensure that we have a safe flight, because it can predict the failure well in advance. You can see the ugly Google car. You would have heard of the car being driven on its own. It actually creates a gigabyte of data per second. Now these are all examples of the fact that there is so much of data which is getting generated. Goes without saying that it really opens up a huge opportunity for folks who are in the business of analytics, for organizations who are wanting to create new generation opportunities, products, following what I call the digital scenario of Make in India, where such things could be embedded into the products. And that's happening. You know, today if you look at the new generation cars, the car can actually park on its own, and it is all embedded inside the product which is manufactured. All this means that there is a big opportunity which is sitting around for us to kind of encash on. Mobility, on the other hand, you heard from Rajan in terms of what is the kind of size which is sitting out there in India and what kind of opportunity it has opened up, both in terms of innovation as well as for all of us here in India, a great addition to the economy on the whole. If you look at a product like Apple, well, Apple is right there in order to kind of make us talk to someone or maybe use the capability for sending mails out and so on. But the focus of Apple is not just ensuring that it is a device only used for communication. They are looking at building a complete ecosystem around it, and that's how the payment system is now integrated there, and now they have come out with a wearable device, which in turn gets connected to the applications which are sitting out there, which keeps tab on our health, how much have we walked, how many floors have we climbed, and so on and so forth, which in turn could be feeding back into the hospital where I may be attached to. These are ways and means of how ecosystems could be built around such products. So how do we use this data discovery that is happening across many such scenarios? With all this data, how can I store it efficiently is the question which most of us are asking, because size of this data is way beyond the realm of conventional databases. And that's where comes in a product like Hadoop. Next question, I need data right away, because gone are the days when probably we would keep the data and kind of load it once in a week, end of the day and so on. Because right now the need for analytics has come in almost real time, and that's where comes in the concept of using the data streaming process in order to kind of take calls on. Next question, now that I have access to this data, where do I start? Comes in the concept of visualization, and finally, how do I use to find new possibilities? That's where comes in the value of analytics. And when I'm using the word new possibilities, today we are not really in search of what I call known unknown. While Mr.